Alrighty, guys. It is June 10th, and we are having our second and final HSDA Town Hall for the 2023 election season. My name is Samay Sahu. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the chairman of HSDA, and I'm joined by the wonderful Maddie Lilly, who is our finance director and who's going to help me once again with timing tonight's Town Hall. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so sorry that we weren't able to live stream this, but hopefully you guys are enjoying and are going to be entertained with tonight's Town Hall. So this is the format for tonight's Town Hall is going to be very similar to the last one, except that, well, let me just get into it really quickly. So for the general question session, there's going to be 1 minute of response time for each candidate. Then after that, there's going to be a candidate specific question section, and each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond. And then a kind of a third round where we're going to be, after each candidate goes, during their candidate specific question section, we're going to open the floor off for all the rest of the candidates to ask any questions that are pressing on their mind to these candidates, and they're going to have 2 minutes in total response, similar to Model UN. And yeah, we're going to go in a different order this time. We're going to start with, Mizuki.
Wait, did you say 2 minutes to respond to the questions?
Yeah.
In total for like, wait.
Not for each question, in total.
So it's 1 minute and then 1:30 and then questions and then 2 minutes of response.
Yeah, so basically someone will ask a question, I'll run the clock. Once you finish your response on that, I'll stop the clock. And then we just repeat with that until you've used up all your 2 minutes.
Okay, so like Congress too.
That was a very good clarifying question. I had the same question beforehand. And yeah, we're just going to get into things in just a sec, and we're going to use a different order than we did last time, starting with development director. So yeah, we're just gonna get right into things. Let me just get there. Okay, so we are going to start with Edward. Edward, are you ready? Perfect. So your general question is, for states that are red and in low population areas, it is very hard to get 3 chapters with 3 members in each. Will you reform the HSDA bylaws to allow for states to become chartered with a small number of members? And will you change the bylaws to allow more states to get chartered into HSDA?
As development director, really focusing on reforming the bylaws isn't like too much my job, but as development director, I will make sure to help the vice chairs, chairs, and other members of the e-board to help focus on these red states and make sure that we can reform our bylaws to make sure we can start reaching out to the more less blue states to make sure that they can have a representation in our organization.
Thank you so much for that. The next general question is going to go for the other development candidate that we have, Bobby. Bobby, your general question is, the development director handles, among other things, HSDA's finances. What would you change about HSDA's fundraising strategy?
Yeah, hi everyone. Just to reintroduce myself, my name is Bobby Callaghan. I'm a rising senior, and I serve as the vice chair of Connecticut chapter and the expansion director of the LGBTQ plus caucus. So in terms of HSDA's finances, I think that we've had really big struggles with trying to actually finance summits, obviously on the national and also state level. So I know that I mentioned this last time in the town hall, but I run a national organization myself, so I've had a lot of experiences with this. And so I probably bring first my own personal experiences, and so my own personal connections with that. So I have a lot of connections with foundations and corporate funders that I would probably hopefully bring into HSDA to try to fund state and also national summit levels. And then the second thing that I would probably do is try to increase our efforts via social media. I know that we have a ton of stuff going on social media, but I would love to utilize Twitter because that's where a lot of politically active people stay. And usually they're very interested in supporting a cause like this. So those are kind of the 2 things I would do.
Thank you so much, Bobby. Now we're going to move on to the general questions for our programs candidates, starting with Hannah. Hannah, oftentimes there's a low turnout for national events and trainings. How will you improve this?
Okay, hi, my name is Hannah, and I'm from SoCal, like I mentioned during last town hall. So yeah, definitely that question has been brought up before when I was connecting with some of you guys, and I think it's a really important thing to address. And something that I was thinking of to address that was promoting way beforehand and collaborating with the comms director, development director, and to make sure that we really have this set out from the beginning, because I don't want to rush anything. I don't want to procrastinate anything. We're all busy. We all have our own schedules. So I think it's important to respect that and promote way early on. I'm also really proactive and I'm really good with planning things. I love using schedules and calendars and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll definitely plan earlier, reach out to as many people as I can. And that can be done through connecting with different caucuses, chapters, and state leaders. And yeah, so there we go.
Thank you so much, Hannah. The next general question is going to go for Samad. Samad, your question is, your tenure as programs director will lead into the spring of 2024. How will you go about ensuring activism and action for the presidential race?
Well, that's great. Thank you, Samay. So I think during the presidential race, it's a special time. You see everyone really wanting to get involved and you see everyone wanting to help out. So I think we should take advantage of that eagerness of the people to get, involved, and we coordinate with the communications director. Like Hannah said, her ideas are really similar to mine. We basically have the same ideas. We coordinate with the communications directors to make sure that, our social media presence is strong. We use tools like TikTok or Instagram, or platforms where we can really get out our message and then recruit people. But in order to recruit people, I think we also need to make sure that there's accountability for the people we elect to be our regional directors. Because if I really wanted to get involved with my community, it was a bit hard for me to get started when I originally started. My regional director, she's great, love her, but it took a while to get to really get in touch, to set things up. So I think we need to hold the people we put in these positions accountable in order to have an active community, because otherwise, I mean, I'm sure everyone would love to get involved, but can't happen right now.
Thank you so much for that, Samad. Now we are going to move on to our communications director candidates. So to start things off, we're going to talk to Yana. Yana, your question is, in the past year, HSDA members have been featured in NPR, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, and more. How can we ride off such successes and increase our media presence in the future?
So I think that one of the main things is really just connecting with other organizations, and that is kind of part of my advocacy and transition part of my platform. So those are a lot of newsletters, obviously, but I do think that through partnering with organizations, say the YMCA or other nonprofits, we could really get our name out there and the name of our members. I know personally I serve on a national board for the YMCA, and through Youth in Government and other programs like National Advocacy Days, I've seen just how much that nonprofits can help out in uprising our youth and really lifting up organizations outside of themselves. So along with that and our own website and creating spotlights internally, I think that that could really help to uplift our youth voices.
Thank you so much for that, Yana. Our next general question is going to go to Mizuki. Mizuki, your question is, how would you ensure that all members of HSDA have the opportunity to be active in our organization throughout the year and in the loop about all events, not just state and national leaders, and that you as a communications director are approachable to all members?
Hi, everyone. So just a little recap. My name is Mizuki. I'm currently the National Social Media Director, Arizona Vice Chair, and I'm actually interim comms director right now. But more than anything, if you've read my emails or had a time to chat with me, I brought this idea of reorganization first, because HSDA comms has a responsibility to facilitate responsivity within everyone else. So before anything else, what I want to do is revamp what I call like our current 24/7 response system, because right now it's expected that all leaders are active 100% of the time, but that doesn't count time for time zones. HSDA in HSDA having lives outside. But in order to count for that, I want to create HSDA's NAT staff or e-board office hours, where once a week there's a set time where members and staff leaders have a chance to talk to every single e-board or NAT staff member individually. So if they want to come talk to me about how they can reorganize their outreach plans, I'm always going to be there that 1 hour a week. So more than anything, I want to make sure that accessibility is easy on both parts, one for the leaders and then also for the member seeking.
Thank you, Mizuki. Now we're going to move on to our vice chair candidates. I just want to preface that we only have two general questions for our vice chair candidate, so you will be hearing repeated questions. To start things off, we'll hear from Asya. Asya, your question is, what reforms do you think are necessary for the National Committee?
Thank you. So just to introduce myself, I'm Asya Ardawatia. I'm a rising senior at Dulles High School. Thank you, Samay, for that question. So again, the NACCOM, right, I think is so important and so integral to HSDA because they are who bring in like our members, right? They're the people in charge of like these states, especially in red states, they are the ones who pull in our members and really do the advocacy on the ground level. So making sure that that all NACCOM staff have a good team that's surrounding them, right? Because a lot of times what I've heard from people I've connected to is that the work can fall onto just one person. So making sure that they have a team behind them, that they're and a lot of time they do, but sometimes they need an extra push because they don't have like enough people to sign up for those positions, right? So making sure that HSD is helping them getting the resources and the support that they need. And then also what I wanted to say was, sorry, I had a brain fart. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you, Asya. The next question is going to go to Alex. Alex, your question is, how can we elevate caucus leaders' opinions on national issues?
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm from Minnesota and I'm a rising senior. So the caucus system has been the topic of much discussion throughout this campaign. And the number one issue with the caucuses is that their opinions have not been listened to. And now, as it's a simple fix to fix this issue. We simply need to have more communication with caucus leaders by sending out a monthly form that will allow caucus leaders to submit feedback. We can hear what these caucuses actually want. And now I'm not going to come up with some unrealistic solution by saying that I'll be in constant, continuous communication with caucus leaders. No, because that just won't work. But what I will do is implement a monthly form for caucus leaders to fill out for feedback because we need to listen to these caucus leaders. They are the ones who are the most important members of this organization. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alex. The next question is going to go to Stephanie. Stephanie, your question is the same one. How can we elevate caucus leaders' opinions on national issues?
I'm so glad you asked me that because I was actually talking to a couple of my other members of HSDA about this. So we all agree that we see a lot of forums and we see a lot of online communication. However, a lot of the caucus leaders and caucus members don't feel as if they have a tangible way to connect with e-board. And which is why I propose like having bi-weekly meetings with not only each individual state chapters, so we can increase communication and accountability, but also with caucus leaders and caucus members, so that every way and that they're able to communicate with us on a bi-weekly basis. So if they have any questions, concerns, anything that they need to bring up, they can just talk to us since we'll have that bi-weekly meeting.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. The next question is going to go to Carter. Carter, your question is, what reforms do you think are necessary for the National Committee?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think for me, this is simple in my eyes working as a Georgia chair, but also talking to you all, is that right now our bylaws require you to be in constant communication with your state party leadership. And for a lot of our state chapters, that just is not possible for actually a great majority of them. I have had the pleasure of building that connection in Georgia the last year and being able to work with Congresswoman Nikema Williams and launching events with thousands of voters and door knockers with high schoolers in Georgia. And then there's other states that are just in the last month getting those connections and finding those resources. But we need to, as a national board, connect those state leaders with their party chairs. I think we have a big resource at our disposal, which is the DNC, and they can help us directly if it's not through our own connections, but through the DNC's connections to connect those state leaders individually with those party chairs.
Thank you so much. the last question is going to go to Henry. And Henry, your question is the same. What reforms do you think are necessary for the National Committee?
Thank you, Samay. Just a reminder, my name is Henry Paulo. I'm the chair of the High School Democrats of Wisconsin and the Midwest Regional Director. I've served on NatCom this year, and as a regional director, I work directly with our state chairs on NatCom. And I think our biggest issue on NatCom right now is we struggle to get a quorum every meeting. It's impossible for us to amend our bylaws if we simply don't have a quorum. That's why I'm pushing for further engagement in HSDA. First off, my goal is to create a special standing committee made up of state leaders and regional leaders that will work directly with our vice chairs and programs director to come up with solutions and amendments to our bylaws that we can then present to the National Committee that will better our engagement and accountability. I also want to strengthen accountability rules for our state chairs and NAT staffers. If people do not show up to NatCom meetings, they need to be held accountable. And we also need to further publicize our National Committee meetings and stay in constant contact with our state chairs and NAT staffers to make sure that they attend every meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. We're now going to move on to our chair candidates. To start things off, I have a question for Victor. Victor, your question is, time management as the chair can be difficult, whether it be balancing state leaders' concerns, e-board emergencies, DNC due diligence. So my question is, what responsibilities would you prioritize as chair?
As always, thank you, Samay, for the question. And to reiterate, as always, hi, my name is Victor Nahosa. I am a candidate for the chairship of the HSDA. I serve as the Midwest Regional Director with Henry this year and as Vice Chair of the LGBTQ caucus. And to answer your question, Samay, time management is important. Being able to manage such a large grassroots organization is the foundation of creating larger democratic voter bases, may that be through any sort of vote banks, canvassing, and all that good stuff. And I feel that as chair, we should be, or myself more at it, should be prioritizing communication and strategizing with my e-board and NAT staff to be able to bring these larger grassroots activism and items that are important to youth members such as ourselves in the HSDA.
Thank you so much, Victor. The next question is going to go to Luke. Luke, as chair, what would you change or maintain about the current direction of HSDA?
Hi, y'all. Thank you for the question. To reiterate, my name is Luke. I'm from Georgia. I apologize for not making the last town hall. As far as how I would change the direction of HSDA or even continue the great direction we're on, I think that as we head into the 2024 election, we really need to be focusing on how we can build up our strength as an organization and get our members to places they need to be in order to really succeed in this 2024 election. It's not a success for our organization if we're just watching these elections happen. We need to be actively participating. And so I would continue the work in connecting our members with internships and fellowships, while also working with partner organizations like the DNC, state parties, Young Dems, College Dems, and advocacy organizations to really make sure we're getting out there and we're not just walking around and watching people vote, but we're making sure we're getting them to vote and to vote in the ways that we want them to. And so HSDA really needs to be very active in how we shape the way that youth advocacy works in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. The next question is going to go to Maya. Maya, your question is, what would be your first actions as a member of the DNC?
Thank you for the question today. My name is Maya Seakin. I'm a rising senior from Oceanport, New Jersey. And I would work with the DNC, or like what I would do with the DNC is really just try to leverage our position as on the DNC and sort of advocate for what we want as a youth organization. I think that working with the DNC is super important, and we're so lucky to have the opportunity to be able to voice our opinions with the DNC. Really, as chair, I just want to be a voice for, I guess a voice for all youth Democrats in HSDA, outside of HSDA. I think that it's really important that we start leveraging our position on the DNC to start talking about issues that matter to us, specifically as high schoolers, because we have such a unique perspective that is often, I would say, like, neglected at times. So I think by using our position there, we can enact a lot of change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maya. The last general question for the chair candidates is going to go to Anjani. Anjani, your question is one that we've heard before. Time management as the chair can be difficult, whether it be balancing state leader concerns, e-board emergencies, DNC due diligence. So the question is, what responsibilities would you prioritize as chairwoman?
Question. Hi everyone. My name is Sanchini Sharma. She, her pronouns, and I'm currently your regional director for the Southeastern region. So for the question, I think that there's many things to prioritize as a chair, and you're ultimately the head of this organization, but the most important thing is to own the national committee and everyone working not necessarily below you but with you. So for example, making sure that the vice chairs have everything they need, making sure that development directors on the right track of the national staff. I think it's important that the chair prioritizes their time towards things or towards people that will help to bring this organization to a meeting with a local chapter leader that has a big prominent chapter. I think that's a great usage of time. I think that ultimately the moral is that we should prioritize as chair, prioritize the time where we could where.
Well, thank you so much, Anjani. So
could grow from that. So okay, thank you.
I think there was a little bit of a time glitch over there, or maybe it's just me.
It said she was on mute and the sound was still coming, so it was a glitch.
That's okay. Thank you so much, Anjani. And that marks the end of round one. If you were late as a candidate coming in, you're still going to be able to participate in round two. So going back down to development director, we're going to get into round two, our candidate specific questions. Just a reminder, you're going to get a minute and a half to answer your question, and then after you're going to get 2 minutes to answer whatever questions that the rest of the candidates have for you, if any. So going back down to it, let's talk to Edward. Edward, you mentioned in your platform that you hope for people to join HSDA more efficiently. What policies specifically would you pursue to accomplish this?
Well, I'd make it more evident when people sign up to make a chapter, or people sign up to, well, just sign up to HSDA in general, to make sure that they can help spread the word of how to sign up and what our organization is. I'll add, I'd recommend to our communications director or our programs director to help make sure that we can spread the word that this is how you sign up, and maybe make a web page on our website on how to sign up in general. Because even when I signed up in general, because I'm just a leader, I'm a local leader. I'm president of a local chapter in my area. So I was the first person. I when I took over my chapter, I had started from basically I had few people, maybe 10 people in my chapter at most. And as my chapter continued to grow, it just, everyone in my chapter, they couldn't really figure out how to sign up too well. And we eventually helped a few of them sign up, but I think it'd be a great idea to help local chapters kind of spread the word about how to sign up, and maybe start and maybe put a web page on how to spread the word and just how to sign up in general.
Thank you for that, Edward. Now we are going to open the floor. Does anyone have any questions for Edward? Bobby.
Wait,
Oh, Anjani, do you have a question?
Wait, I have a question. So anyone can ask, not just the other development director candidate,
Yes,
right?
anyone can ask. Yes, we said
well, I'll take the first question. So Edward, as development director, how do you plan to actually, rebuild, for example, the caucus systems that are not that active? Yeah, just a question.
I plan on working with the communications programs and all the rest of the e-board to make sure that we're in continuous contact with not only the leaders of these caucuses, but also the members, to continue to make sure they're both active in their caucus, and maybe even work with them to have caucus specific events.
Bobby, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, no worries. So I saw on your platform, Edward, that you said you would be open 24/7 for any questions. And we've seen that even with leadership members having their emails open for 24 or being open 24/7, there's still been a lack of communication between state and national leadership. So I was wondering what specifically you want to do to ensure they'll be available for struggling chapters / caucuses.
Well, not only will I want to be there to be there for like my emails open, I can answer any questions, I can help with disputes, but I also want to help reform and revise the ethics committee because as we've seen, it hasn't been really very active recently, and I believe that the ethics committee is a strong, it needs to be a strong point in our organization to make sure people can be held accountable for what they do in our organization, to make sure everyone can get out there and be active, and that way everyone can get the best that they can out of our organization.
And I see one more hand raised from Avery, but I don't believe you're a candidate. And correct me if I'm wrong. Are you just a viewer?
Yeah, I'm just a viewer.
Sorry. Unfortunately, the questions are for candidates only, but
Oh, okay.
But feel free to privately message Edward, or any other candidate for that matter. Thank you for that, Edward. The next candidate specific question is going to go to Bobby. Bobby, your question is that you stated in your platform that your number one priority is, quote, to make sure that chapters are well supported and have the resources to run smoothly. So what specific actions would you take to improve chapter support, and why are they necessary?
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking from personal experience, I know for a fact that it's been really difficult. Well, not really difficult, but there's definitely been some challenges as a vice chair of a state chapter to get going and kind of run a dormant chapter. So my main plan, and what I've said a lot, is that I want to revamp chapter resources. So my plan is to create a new Google Drive that will be filled with tons of materials, including one-on-one guides to how to organize, one-on-one guides on how to best reach out to local representatives, and also guides on best practices to recruit new members to your chapter. And I think this is definitely necessary because I've heard overwhelmingly that a lot of chapters, whether that be local or state, have struggled to actually reach out to members or reach out to possible prospective recruitment members. So I definitely want to revamp the chapter resources so that so that chapters have an easier time building out and expanding within their own state or local community.
Thank you so much for that, Bobby. Now I'll open the floor. Does anyone have any questions for Bobby? I see Vincent.
All right, thank you. Okay, so Bobby, I see you specifically said on creating one-on-one guides to help with the chapters. How do you plan to make the guide unique to different local areas? Because different governments or different different places, they may run things differently. And they may have different relationships with their
Yeah, for sure. So basically my plan would be is to make curated guides based on regional differences. Obviously, I can't curate it to every single different town or state because that would be a lot of documents. But I definitely will plan on curating it specifically to regional chapters. So obviously, if there's more pressing issues in certain places, like for example, red states obviously will most likely have a harder time recruiting members, then I would probably curate it differently to hopefully support them better. So that's kind of my plan for that.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Bobby. Last chance, any other questions for Bobby? Going once, going twice. Alrighty, now let's move on to the next candidate section. Moving on to programs. So the first question is for this round is going to go to Hannah. Hannah, your question is, you mentioned in your platforms that you would create task forces around important topics to guide HSDA's decision-making. HSDA has in the past had issues with committees being inactive or too bloated. How would you make sure that such task forces stay active and that HSDA's bureaucracy does not get too large?
All right, thank you for the question. So I also discussed this with other candidates and other HSDA members as well. So definitely brought up in conversations and to my attention. And something that I was thinking that I could implement was that We can have e-board members that are passionate about that specific issue area or that topic, just to be there to like facilitate and make sure that the HSD members are kept on track. I think it's so important that the members can kind of drive this where they want to and kind of see it to the end. But I think it's also really important that they're kept accountable with board members and have the support from them. And of course, like I'll be there to help without help with anything that's needed.
Thank you for that, Hannah. Does any candidates have any questions for Hannah? Anyone? Oh, Yana.
Okay, so could you possibly kind of like walk us through what you imagine a town hall looking like, or not a town hall, but one of these meetings and workshops?
Yeah, for sure. Do you want me to focus on task forces or workshops or both?
Pick one.
Okay. I'll pick a task force. Okay, so for task forces, just kind of going along with what I was saying earlier, I really want it to be member driven. So I was thinking that the UR member and the HSDA members can kind of draft like an agenda, and it can be really clear. It can have like timestamps on it, etc. But it will really be ran by HSDA members. And they can meet reoccurringly, like on their own schedule, as long as they're kept on track. And I was also thinking that it can, like, the duration can also vary depending on what they're trying to accomplish. And then I don't know if I have time to go on to the workshops, but just kind of like briefly touching on it. I'm also really good with like agending and organizing. So for workshops, I was also thinking of, having a really clear agenda and making sure I send it out to other e-board members so that we're all on the same track and we go according to plan. So any other questions? I'm also trying to avoid the golden hour sunlight. So yeah. It's like hurting my eyes.
You're all good. I think any last questions for Hannah? I think not. All right. Thank you so much, Hannah. Enjoy the golden hour. The next question is going to go to Samad. Samad, your question is, much of your platform deals with coordination between the national and state or local levels. So how will you ensure that such coordination exists while avoiding criticisms of an overactive national board and maintaining the freedom of state chapters?
Yeah, so thanks for the great question. This is actually the main focus of my platform, as you guys know. So I think one thing I think would really help make sure that, national really focuses on the local levels is by national members providing like mentorships for local state leaders. I think local and state leaders often need the support of national members in order to succeed, someone who can show them around, someone who can really teach them the ways of high school Democrats and what our views are. So I think that would be good in order to make sure that, we could have collaboration. Really, I think it's more about getting the regional directors active because that's often the biggest source of contact between, national and state levels. And maybe even, we should also have the ethics committee, as Edward said, looking into inactive members to make sure that those people are being held accountable. I also think that often national gets like the biggest slice of the cake, they're the ones who often go to like all the events, they do the fun stuff, and the local and state levels often just get left out. No offense to me, but I really want to make sure that everyone can have, lots of fun working for HSD. Maybe also like hosting events in different local states, having conventions in each state, doing that stuff so we really connect national and state levels and not make it look like national is doing all the work. We want to make sure that the work is evenly distributed so everyone can, look good.
Thank you so much for that, Samad. Does anyone have any questions for him? Going once, going twice. Alrighty, let's move on to the next category. Thank you so much, Samad. Now off to the communications director candidates. We're going to start off with Yana. Yana, your platform discusses the need to increase communication between the national and state levels due to failure of information to be fully shared. Why do you think this current communication is not successful, and what would you propose to remedy this issue?
So I think that a large part of why this communication has died off, it was great at the beginning of the year, but then I noticed as a state and regional director that it died off
towards the end. I think it's really just the fact that as we settle into our roles, we often forget how important it is to make sure the smaller guys in the organization get the information they need. But I mean, on the national level, if you think about it, the states and the local chapters are exactly what's running this organization forward. And so I think that through kind of a waterfall effect, through whether it's Slack or a different platform, we can really make sure that all information is getting down from the national board to national staff, regional staff, state staff, and then all the way down to our just community-wide chapters. And I think that a large part of this is utilizing websites on both the national and state levels, and also just having monthly meetings and reorganizing an ethics committee. I've noticed that in my state at times there can be a lack of communication, whether we're at different events or just dealing with graduation, as a lot of us are. And so I think that creating an ethics committee, especially on the national side, could keep everybody accountable for making sure information is going down to everybody.
Thank you so much, Yana. Does anyone have any questions for her? Mizuki.
Hi, Yana. I was just wondering, as comms director, how do you think of like facilitating this ethics council, especially because I didn't know that if that's something that comms like has a direct impact on.
So I don't think comms necessarily has a super direct impact on Ethics Council, but as a board member, I think that on the national level, we all do have a part in facilitating something like that, whether it's through bylaws or just making sure reaching out to people to make sure that we have one, because from my understanding, we don't have one at all right now.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions for Yana? Alrighty. Thank you so much for that, Yana. Now off to our next communications director candidate, Vincent. In your platform, you discussed the need to, quote, increase member activity and participation in national HSDA events. And HSDA, under successful e-boards, has pledged and then struggled to do just that. So what policies would you specifically pursue to boost engagement, and how do you know that they'll work?
Thank you for your question. My name is Vincent Russell, and I'm the current communications director of the Georgia High School Democrats. So in order to implement, policies to implement to increase, member activity, one, we can communicate, more efficiently with members, like to let them know what's going on. Rather than just sending a long email out, we can send like a video promo on our social media, or send a video promo to Instagram, kind of as I did when I announced my candidacy. I sent a GIF and it was a video. And as I know, from prior knowledge of serving in roles involving marketing communications, that teenagers and most people respond greatly to video communications. And also just from the response of the poll that I took when I first announced my candidacy, I asked people, what is their best form of communication? And a lot of them responded as videos. So in order to increase, member activity, when we have events, I would send, videos out and promos on the national social medias and through email communications. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Vincent. Does anyone have any questions for Vincent? Mizuki?
Hi, Vincent. I just have a question. So how would you say you would differentiate how that communication sent out, like how the video is exactly sent out? Because would it be just sent out like an email like it was before?
So are you asking me the difference between a video or like in a regular email?
Like, how would you how would you send out this like video in difference to how we usually communicate? Like, is this still through the same platform?
Well, as I noticed on the Instagram, we don't really post, as many videos. So yes, it'd be through our Instagram, and we also send it through the emails platform. As I said earlier, I sent out my campaign release video as a GIF, which was, it was like, GIFs, like they move. So people would see like a GIF in the email and like click on it. And then also gave me some views on my YouTube video. And then I was also able to send people like a downloaded version. Did I answer your question? All right, thank you for your question.
Thank you for the question, Mizuki. Does anyone have any other questions for Vincent? All righty. Thank you so much, Vincent. Now we are going to move on to Mizuki. Mizuki, your platform discusses the creation of a communications department within some national staff positions. Why do you believe that this is a necessary change to our current communications department?
Hi, everyone. So I think really what it comes down to is our connections via our perception of inclusivity. So for my work in month to midterms, I knew that as social media director, I had a social media committee. So it was around 5 people working to make sure that we were being consistent in our posting schedule. And because I had that group of people to rely on, our consistency was so up. The way that we increased our impressions was nearly up to 74,000 every single week. And so more than anything, because I know that we've added multimedia, we revamped TPT, and we revamped the collective catalyst, I know that especially moving into the primary season in terms of how do we organize everything on the digital network related to programs, we're going to need a team to ensure that podcasts get sent in time, especially because I want to register what I call the membership campaign platform. For example, members have the opportunity to speak about their personal campaign experiences, whether it be on a local level or on a national level, and express it towards our national level, not necessarily even if our social media is already covered, but in terms of like other presence through podcast networks. But that doesn't happen under one person, especially because I know, especially as a digital networker, your entire job relies on how programs is active too. And you don't want to let programs down. So in order to ensure that we're actually being accessible more than anything, it has to be reliant on a communications department that's going to help you keep accountable.
Thank you, Mizuki. Does anyone have any questions for Mizuki? Vincent.
Hey, Mizuki. All right. So I love your idea of creating a communications department, and I just have like a 2-part question, or it's mainly just one question. One, who would serve on the communications director in terms of like communications department in terms of the roles, and 2, how will you keep the communications department on task with the other roles that you have as communications director and as a national board member?
Yeah, so when I was on social media committee, I'm a social media director. We basically had a committee in which we would send out a Google form just like any other application, and then people would apply in through there. We'd go through their forms, we'd go through their different, applications and like their digital skills, and then we select around 5 people. So it works just like any other recruitment series, but instead I have a social media committee, a multimedia committee, a podcast committee, a TPT committee, etc. And the way that I would organize it is essentially putting out task forces every single week. So when program sends you a list of different activities that they're doing for the week, if you've already created a specific template for the type of post that you need to make for a certain program event, you just allow for them to access the Canva account and create those things on the social media committee. But in terms of the multimedia podcast committee, the same works, right? So if there's a series of members that are interested in joining the podcast, you do the same thing. There's a template for how they get involved, and you have the other multimedia committee members take on that template. So more than anything, it's responsibility in terms of the different comms sector directors, but it's you organizing it in terms of how are they going to function and able to do the other work.
All right. Summa, do you still have a question?
Vincent literally stole my question.
All right. Oh, well, Yana has a question.
All right, so speaking as like a regional and statewide comms director and then a comms and marketing director for a few other things, I found that it's sometimes hard to find people to fill these.
I think
and you mentioned having about 4 different committees, 5 people on each. You mentioned your previous one, so that's about 20 plus people. What would you do if you couldn't find people to fill these positions?
I think we 100% do fill those positions, because when I had sent out the application for the social media committee, we had over 17 responses. So that's just within one committee alone. I don't think it's going to be an issue at all, especially because when we sent out like the application for multimedia and like the TPT editors in chief, and for like running collective catalyst, we had surpluses of applications. And for example, the social media committee was primarily composed of the other candidates that were running for social media director with me at that time. So there was never a problem of filling those roles in. And in the case that that does happen, that's the whole reason why scheduling exists.
Thank you for the question, Yana, and thank you for answering all of those, Mizuki. We are now going to move on from our comms director candidates and on to the vice chair candidates. So the first candidate specific question for our vice chair candidates goes to Asya. Asya, your question is, your platform discusses recognizing the HSDA network between national, state, and local levels. What exactly do you propose doing, and why do you think that our current systems are not adequate in this way?
Hi, so Thank you for the question. So I think that we need to have an open line of communication between the national, local, and the state levels, because right now, sometimes the line of communication is not that open most of the time. So a lot of people I've been talking to talk about this the miscommunication that can happen, the errors that can occur, and that doesn't just hurt HSDA, but it can hurt the Democratic Party because we're not carrying out the specific things that we should be. So making sure that the e-board is accessible for state leaders who want to talk to somebody, making sure that there's a specific liaison between the e-board and state chairs, so those people who know who to contact if they have any questions. Then same thing for a local chapter liaison who can all these local chapter chairs and these leaders, they can contact that specific liaison if they have any questions, just to make sure that everybody's getting the same information, right? And then also working closely with the communications director and making sure that their guides posted out and having them have all the right information, because right now local chairs can get different information than state chairs, and the same thing with national. So trying to make sure that everybody has the same information at the same time is so important. And so that's kind of like, I want to increase this cohesiveness between all three levels of HSDA.
Thank you for that, Asya. I see that Vincent has a question for you, and Stephanie after that.
Hi, so first and foremost, I love your spirit of teamwork in your platform. So my question is to you, how do you plan to make the e-board accessible? Because you said earlier, like in your statement, that you were going to make the e-board accessible, given that, the executive board is so busy.
Thank you. And thank you for that. And also thank you for the question. I think that's really important. So the e-board can seem really intimidating sometimes, right? Because they are really busy, but they also have such a big role, right, in the organization. So just making sure that, like, one of my ideas was having a new member orientation, making sure that people who come into the national know what they're supposed to do and where they're supposed to go. Because when I first joined HSDA, I didn't really know like my way, how to like climb the ropes. So I want to make sure that nobody else has to go through that. So having new member orientations, also having maybe monthly meetings, so the e-board can join maybe once in 2 months, just so the e-board can meet these members. They can ask them questions, they can introduce them to each other. So then these members, these also local chapter leaders and state leaders, regional organizers can also join, just so everybody gets to know each other and they're not intimidated, or it's easier for them to contact the e-board and get to know them better.
Thank you for that question, Vincent. Stephanie, what's your question?
Yeah, so you mentioned having kind of like a connection between, I'm so sorry, it's really loud in here. Give me 1 second. Okay, can you hear me okay? It's really loud and we're in the car and I have like 1 bar of Wi-Fi. Okay, so you mentioned having like a specific connection between state chairs and e-board. And I believe like we do have regional directors. So what difference would this liaison make? Like what's the difference between what you're suggesting and the already existing regional directors?
Thank you. And definitely, okay, I think that your question is really valid. So what the difference is, right? Because regional organizers, they have to work between so many different state chairs and they have a lot of work on them already. So I want to make sure that they don't have to also facilitate this communication. Like if a state chair has to ask e-board something, I don't want them to go through a middleman, right? Like, oh, can you please ask like Same about this, right? I want them to like have like a direct line of communication to the e-board, and that would be through the local chapter liaison. So then the regional organizers, they can work on other things like projects, networking with their officials. There's so many things that they can do rather than just being like the middleman between these the e-board and these local chapters and these state chairs. Because there's a lot of and then also local chapter liaisons, they would be primarily for these local chapters rather than state chairs. So thank you.
Thank you for the question, Stephanie. Does anyone else have any questions for us here? Alrighty, well, thank you so much for all those responses, Asya. The next candidate that we're going to talk to is Alex. Alex, your question is, how do you plan to effectively implement your pillar of decentralization within HSDA while still maintaining a strong sense of connection and collaboration among state chapters and the national organization while potentially working on the DNC?
All right, so my pillar decentralization is really about giving more opportunities to local and state members. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first joined HSDA, I wasn't aware of many opportunities that were going on. It was really hard for me to fully integrate into the organization. And my idea, it's a simple idea, but I'm a firm believer that simple ideas are the best because they're the easiest solutions. Now, my idea to decentralize this organization is simply by sending out a monthly newsletter that updates local and state chapter members on what's been going on at the national level, providing a list of potential opportunities for these local and state chapter members, and also providing a anonymous Google form where people can give feedback to how we've been operating. And another idea that I have had is to make NatCom more about what states need. We need to hear more about what these states need because national is very successful. I'll hand that to you guys. You guys have done a very good job. But what we need to do as an e-board is give more resources to states because the states are what make up this organization. And using NatCom, we can hear directly from states to hear what resources they need because it is so important to utilize our position as the e-board because like a person earlier said, e-board is intimidating.
Thank you for that, Alex. Luke?
Hi there. So I talked to several people while campaigning, and I know we've talked about it briefly about how sometimes the bureaucracy of HSDA's national organization can kind of scare people away from solutions. So in your policy of decentralization, are there any changes you would make to either HSDA's structure or its bylaws to really hand more power or opportunities back to state and local chapters?
So my idea for this is I don't think the bylaws need any reforming. I think the bylaws, people just need to follow the bylaws more because it states in section 530 of the bylaws that states must endeavor to get into contact with their state parties. But for high schoolers, this is a hard feat to manage. When I first joined in my state, I had no idea of any member of my state party. Now, we can provide more power and resources to states by providing these contacts and setting up a working relationship between each state chapter and its state party.
Thank you for the question, Luke. Edward?
I really liked your idea about giving like these ideas for local chapters to have these events and have these lists of events. But as a local chapter leader, I've helped organize events for my own chapter. Would you help give local chapter leaders the resources to help them organize their own events?
Now, a large issue with this is HSDA's status. It's very hard to fundraise with our current status because we have the same status as sororities and fraternities. Now, we can change this, and then we'll be able to provide these local chapters with the resources they need. Just a simple amount of money. And by doing more than just a PDF file on HSDA's website and actually providing a personal connection to local chapter members, we can help set up these events as well.
Thank you for the question, Edward. Yana?
All right, so you mentioned that you wanted to create. Okay, sorry, my mic keeps turning off. You mentioned you wanted to create a newsletter, and while we do have one, I do believe that's more the comms role. What role do you see yourself playing in a newsletter?
See, I think partnering with the comms director is actually an essential part of the vice chair's role because it's outlined as a part of the vice chair's position that outreach is the #1 goal. And now outreach can't be achieved without communication. So the vice chairs and the comms director have to work hand in hand in order to further this organization's outreach. And that's why I think this newsletter is a part of both of our positions because outreach is our #1 goal.
Thank you for the question. Does anyone else have any other questions for Alex? Last chance. Alrighty, well, thank you for all of those responses, Alex. We're now going to move on to our next vice chair candidate Carter. Carter, your platform discusses communication and the disconnect between state and national leadership within HSDA. How exactly do you plan to increase and maintain a connection while also ensuring state interests do not dominate over national priorities?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think what we see right now, and I know I mentioned this in the last town hall, but we are at a point in time where our local and state leaders aren't able to properly raise their voices to national in a way where things will actually get done and make change. I think we're at a point as well where, you know, we are seeing very community specific issues that need to be addressed within our organization that nationally we can't just address alone by one general platform or policy. It's going to take specifically reaching out to those communities, whether it's local or state, and talking through with them, what exactly do you need from us? But then also we can make connections for them. I mentioned we have connections with the DNC nationally, but we have connections that go vast through that expansion. If you want to focus on a gun violence related issue, we can connect you to Everytown for gun safety. We have the resources at our disposal and nationally can do something. We have the time right now between now and this fall when the primary really starts to get on the ground with organizing, where we can, if we can set up these bases now and build the infrastructure needed, the DNC can then rely on us to have very active participation in chapters. I think there as well, with all those local and state leaders, through that we'll see a very more active participation in NatCom. We can't expect people on NatCom to show up if they aren't have the resources to even organize themselves before anything.
All righty. Thank you, Carter. Does anyone have any questions for Carter? Henry.
Hey, Carter. So in your platform, you lay out that you want to improve transparency, trust, reliability, engagement, involvement, communication, inclusivity, and membership. However, we can't simply commit to simple ideas. I was wondering if you have any concrete action plans that will allow us to fulfill these values that will translate to a national level.
Well, I would disagree with you there that that's just a simple idea. I think that is something we can actually get done. These things you just mentioned and what I mentioned in my platform is the foundation and bedrock of where our organization is lacking today. Quite frankly, we aren't giving our state and local resources the even ability to communicate with us nationally. We cannot expect them to get any work done themselves. I did this in Georgia, and I passed the Transparency Act in Georgia with a lot of leaders, help with a lot of our local chapters hearing their voices on before I passed it into our legislation of our organization. That ensures that at that point, our state organization was ensuring activity that we had to meet a certain standard that we still follow every week and every 2 weeks, that to make sure we are setting up meetings, we are ensuring that if it's not a confidential call, all of our membership can join on to know exactly what we're doing. So I think what you mentioned with communication, transparency, reliability, it sounds super simple. And I understand that that is something that sounds so general, but it's literally what we're missing to be successful. And I'll say it again, if we can't have partnership with our local and state leaders, we can't expect them to ever show up. And it shouldn't be a surprise to any of us that these people aren't attending meetings because we just aren't supporting them.
Thank you for the question, Henry. Does anyone else have any questions for Carter? Vincent.
Hey Carter, I love your platform where you talk about partnering with our local and state leaders, because that is true that we do need to work with them in order for them to show up. How do you plan on working with local and state leaders other than what you've already talked about today?
Yeah, definitely. So I think what it's going to take is, obviously, you said separate from what I mentioned, but I think we start with knowing exactly specifically what they need. After we have that in mind, I think then the second step, and to answer your question, is that we create these issues to be we address nationally as a whole. I think these.
Well, I guess that's time. Thank you so much for the questions, Vincent. And thank you for those great responses, Carter. We're now going to move on to our next candidate for vice chair, Stephanie. Stephanie, your platform largely focuses on meeting with individual chapters and creating more connections with them. How do you plan to balance monthly meetings with all HSDA chapters with other vice chair duties and projects?
Well, isn't that the reason why we have two vice chairs as well as one chair as well? We can equally split that that responsibility between me and whoever the other vice chair is. And as someone on the NAT staff team, I've learned to juggle going to various events, as well as like my own school activities and being national advocacy director. And I was also involved in local and state HSDA scheduling and using like when to meet, and those apps and websites allowed me to, I guess, schedule my time and use my time wisely. And it doesn't need to be long meetings. If a lot of the chapter presidents need longer meetings, they can always talk to me individually. And texting always works as well. And if they're intimidated by like my presence, like, calling, going through other forms of communication is the way to go. And another thing that I wanted to talk about is actually potential collaboration with Young Democrats of America, because I know in states like mine, California, we have like a strong Democratic presence, but unfortunately some schools have either Young Democrats of America chapters or HSDA chapters. They don't have both. So as someone high up in Young Democrats of America, I figured that we could collaborate with them.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was an echo. Henry, you have a question?
Hey, Stephanie, nice job. So I noticed in your platform, you said you want to kind of coordinate individual meetings with state chapters. So I guess, how would you look to kind of achieve this idea? Would you delegate? Would you look to do the individual meetings yourself? What's your general vision?
My general vision is both vice chairs being there to listen and kind of like talk to the chapter presidents to see different perspectives. But if we do have that overflow of chapter presidents who need to talk to us, we could equally split the meetings. If not, like, I'd be willing to take more of that responsibility since my senior year is going to be a little bit more free. But yeah, thank you for that question.
Any other questions for Stephanie? Last chance. Alrighty, well, thank you so much for those responses, Stephanie. Our next, and I believe, yes, our last candidate for vice chairs is Henry. So Henry, you mentioned that you'd like to create a way for candidates without contested primaries to seek organizational support. So what sort of support do you envision, and how would you have HSDA prioritize races to support?
Hey, thank you, Samay. So I've spent the last year as a swing state chair. I know what it is like to be fighting hard for these races that are going down to the wire. And I also know what it's like to be looking for national support and not knowing how to find this national support. First off, I want to create a position on our e-board that'll work with swing state chairs, so we can direct our national volunteers to help in important races. I also want to directly find off-year election races. For example, in April, we had an incredibly important Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. We mobilized volunteers and we won. However, in future races like this, I want to see more national support. That's why I would create this national position to work with swing state chairs. As well as this, I want to see our volunteers work with candidates through phone banks and holding national phone banks. As Midwest Regional Director, we organized a national abortion rights phone bank that called into swing state races in the Midwest to advocate for Democratic candidates. I want to see more national solidarity between our states, fighting for candidates up and down the ballot, starting at the local level, all the way to the top of the ballot. That's why I propose creating this position and raising awareness surrounding important races in competitive states like Wisconsin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Henry. Does anyone else have any other questions? Carter.
Hey, Henry. So you have a lot of ideas you mentioned in your platform, one including creating a standing committee to talk about some of our pressing issues that affects the NetCom quorum. Shouldn't we, though, address the issue first at the fact that we need more resources to our NatCom members and state leaders before we expect them to even show up at the meeting? Right now, 12 of our states are without chapters, and I think that goes to show why there's a lack of attendance. Would you rather make that a priority possibly, and to work on state and local voices first before you start to launch a new standing committee?
Thanks, Carter. Well, this standing committee addresses that exact issue because right now our state and local leaders don't feel like their voices are being heard. If we were to create this standing committee, we could bring in input from our state leaders on how we can expand into these new states. We could get advice from our regional directors on how we can expand into new chapters and bring in new volunteers. And we can bring amendments to the bylaws that will speed up the process and make it easier for us to charter new state chapters. Simply put, how we are doing things right now isn't working. And we need to bring on board state chairs and local chapter and regional leaders to help bring advice, and we can do this through this standing committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, Carter. Mizuki.
Hi, Henry. Sorry, I was just talking about your purple swing state plan, but in terms of even more, like, how would you see a plan that's maybe different to that in terms of how we're looking at the primaries coming up?
Yeah, well, I think it's obviously important that we stay out of contested primaries, but we also endorse incumbents. In Wisconsin, we did that exact path. I think it's important that we support the Biden-Harris campaign. We have a year and a half to get volunteers on the ground, knocking on doors, making phone calls, and electing Democrats in these important races. If I'm vice chair, I'm going to be supporting the Biden-Harris campaign, and I'll be working with incumbents across the state. And for contested races, we'll wait till after the primaries. And as soon as we have a nominee in each district and each state, we're going to be offering our support there as well. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Mizuki. Vincent? Vincent, you're muted.
Hello?
We can hear you now, Vincent.
So sorry, I had to leave from my laptop because it like froze. But yeah, Henry, I saw on your platform you said taking input from state chairs prior to planning large events. How do you plan to effectively use and analyze insights that you gain from them rather than just making it another survey or form that we're filling out?
Well, I think we just need to figure out what our state chairs are saying, understand the issues we're facing, and then take action steps. We can amend the bylaws. We can get quorums at NatCom. I'm a state chair. I know what it's like to feel like my ideas aren't being heard. I'm going to take the ideas that our state chairs give them and take action steps. We'll work directly with them. Like I said, the standing committee would be a great opportunity for our state chairs and regional directors to propose ideas to improve engagement and accountability outside of NatCom, so that when it comes time to gain a quorum at NatCom and amend our bylaws, we can actually do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, Vincent. Last chance. Any other questions for Henry?
I will say there's only 5 seconds left of answering time, so I don't think we can really take any more questions.
Alrighty. Well, you heard it from Maddie. Thank you so much for those answers, Henry. I don't believe we have any more vice chair candidates. Yes, so we are going to move on to our chair candidates. And to start things off, we'll talk to Anjani. So Anjani, your question is, your platform involves lots of discussion about collaborating with other prominent progressive organizations. How exactly do you plan to establish such connections, and what aspects of HSDA do you think would benefit these organizations enough to have them work with us?
And first of all, thank you, Samay, Anjani Sharma, she, her pronouns. I think it's so important to collaborate with other organizations because they might have resources that we may not. So for example, March for Our Lives, they're a very specific group. However, we can learn so much for them, and they have such a heavy, not necessarily fan base, but they have so much resources that we could both benefit based on that. And what aspect of HSDA it could help? It could help almost every aspect, from engagement, having some of the March for Our Lives members join HSDA. It could go for partnerships, fundraising. There's so many aspects that these organizations, especially prominent organizations, they can help us in many different ways. And there are so many different organizations that are like very hyper specific that could also help us towards meeting our goals. And they could help us partner, especially for these elections, and they could help, swing those swing states. There's so many different ways that partnering with organizations is one of the key highlights that HSDA has thrived on, and that we as an e-board could do so much working with them and building those partnerships and making sure that there's a key collaboration with these various organizations.
Thank you so much for that, Anjani. Does anyone have any questions for Anjani? Going once, going twice. Alrighty, well, thank you so much for that, Anjani. Moving on to our next chair candidate, Victor. Victor, in your platform, you state that you want to have more direct HSDA involvement as part of the DNC and at the convention. The next convention is set to take place after your term as chair would be up. So what specific policies would you pursue to ensure that HSDA is more involved in the DNC and convention? And how would you make sure that they survive past your tenure?
Yes, thank you for the question, Samay. As always, yes, being united with our party should be, other than supporting the Democratic platform and candidates themselves, should be our number one priority. As DNC and Democratic Party is the mother of the HSDA in many ways, right? So one of my policies, as I stated in my platform, is having HSDA members onto the platform committee of the DNC, because at the end of the day, the DNC is full of politicians and people from higher ups, but they're not really including the people that are voting for them, the common folk, students, urban voters, rural voters, all the people that really make the Democratic Party that multicultural position that it is today. And I feel like having, at least at our end, HSDA members, may that be the chair or the vice chair or anyone in the DNC, anybody at the HSDA that is willing to be part of this, as someone at the platform committee and making up those ideas that and values that are made for the Democratic Party. I also believe we should have a keynote speaker that is a youth member and speaking with the DNC and saying that this is our values as Gen Z, and we think being able to be heard in the party of everybody would be as important. And that is pretty much the platform of how being united with the DNC a little bit better.
All right, well, thank you so much, Victor. Does anyone have any questions for Victor? Luke.
Hi, Victor. I just had a few questions. Your platform offers a lot of great ideas. And I'm just looking, and I wanted to get a few, I wanted to hear your thoughts on some of the things you propose. You propose a Solicitor General within the organization. You propose a Board of Innovation, a Middle School Democrats of America, a treasurer, and then you also support revamping several different things. I was just wanted to hear your thoughts on what that would look like, what those positions and organizations, what your view is.
No, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. As always, Luke, these are the stuff that really gets me going. Specifically, may that be the Solicitor General, may that be the Board of Innovation, may that be all extra stuff for the HSDA. And I know some of this stuff may sound like more bureaucracy, and I get that. Not always bureaucracy is good, but I do feel being able to innovate is important. And for the matter of time and all that, I'm going to go straight into the Board of Innovation. And for people that have talked with me and the voters that I've talked to over the last few weeks, was basically stating that this Board of Innovation is built upon the idea that change is a constant, not something that comes up every election cycle and it's like, oh, I'm going to change something. And then it happens, but then there's something else that we need to change, but we wait because no one ever talks about it until the next election cycle. So I feel like having this Board of Innovation is this group of people, group of students from the HSDA that comes up with these ideas and sees these issues happening in the HSDA and think that, oh, we shouldn't wait for the next vice chair candidate, the next comms director coming up and saying, oh, this is a good idea. No, we should be coming up with these ideas and seeing these issues now and fixing them before it's too late, and seeing that, oh, this is a problem, oh, we'll fix it later. No, we should have a board that talks about that. And seeing for time, I'm just going to continue before they stop me. Solicitor General, I feel like in the sense of finding equity, inclusion, and diversity within the HSDA, I feel like having someone that is able to look around and see, like, if there's an issue in this part of the HSDA, there should be someone that comes up and says, oh, there's been complaints, there's been this issue that's been being promoted and being told by a lot of members, and we want to come in and see what the issue is, and that being more the executive branch of the Ethics Council, which is a connection of that. I know there was a lot more that you asked, but that's everything that I remember. If there's anything else, obviously.
Perfect. That was good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, Luke. I see Yana has a question.
There are only 3 seconds left of answering time, so we're not going to be able to take any more questions.
Well, you can always message Victor privately, and thank you so much for the responses, Victor. Trying to see, who do we have next? Luke. So Luke, your question is, in your platform, you mentioned a desire to expand HSDA's committee system, quote, to give members experience in HSDA operations, end quote. HSDA has in the past had issues with committees being inactive or too bloated. So how would you make sure that all committees work effectively, have active members, and that HSDA is not hurt by such a large bureaucracy?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the question. I have heard from people who are concerned about the bureaucracy. And I mentioned it earlier, it just gets a little scary when the national organization keeps tacking on positions and boards and committees and whatnot. And so essentially the root of the committees is, how can we give members an inside look into HSDA operations and experience? And so, I ran the campaigns committee during the 2022 elections, and I fully understand all of the concerns about engagement, people showing up, people staying on task and doing work. But I also know we had a lot of committees that were successful. A lot of my fellow national staff held committees that were able to get things done. And so if we actually look at the experience and successes of our predecessors, as well as people who are working within our national staff, we can create a collaborative environment so we can actually get things done. If we get our members, if we keep agendas, if we make sure that our work is not just done on Zoom meetings, but is also done when people get the chance, we can make sure that we're not relying on their work, but we're giving HSDA members the opportunity to do work for HSDA, to get that experience, and then to join, whether it's state leadership or national leadership. Plenty of people who were on my committee, I see them taking positions in state leadership, and Victor was also on my committee, and so I am happy to see that he is my competitor. Student becomes the teacher kind of thing. So I really want to be given that.
All right, thank you so much for that, Luke. So I see Vincent has a question.
Yes, Luke, I like how organized your campaign is. While reading your platform, I noticed that you wanted to connect states via a partner system in the region. Could you elaborate on the specific duties of the partner system and what you would tend to see as a result of such partnerships?
Yeah, definitely. So you're from Georgia, so you really know how successful that state is. I'm from Georgia too, and I'm really proud of all of the work we've done in the state. But I also noticed that there are states across the country, as well as in the Southeast alone, that could really use a boost, just like Georgia had. And I think that if states in similar regions with similar political geographies, if they're working together, they can collaborate on strategies, on ways to contact their state parties, on boots on the ground organizing, things like that. That way, if states are connecting with one another about social media strategies, about boots on the ground strategy, about field organizing, events, programming, then they can work together and we can all succeed as an organization. I don't think that we should be having national be the only connection between states. States should be able to work with each other rather than constantly going through NatCom or eBoard. And so the partner system makes sure states are able to have that dialogue without going through the national organization.
Thank you so much for that question, Vincent. Does anyone else have any other questions for Luke? Yana.
Would these partnerships be predetermined or would you rely on states to make them themselves? I only ask that because as of now, I don't see an issue in states currently collaborating. I know Wisconsin and Georgia have collaborated in the past. So who would decide these partnerships?
So when we establish a national staff and we get our regional directors, I would work with the regional directors, their individual staff, our development team, to really figure out what are the best partnerships as far as successful chapters and less successful chapters, ones that are starting to get, running. Because if we put two successful chapters together and they're partnering, that doesn't really benefit our organization as a whole. It benefits those two states. But if we're connecting a very successful chapter like Wisconsin or Georgia to maybe chapters that are still starting to get started, like I know Louisiana just started up this past year. If Louisiana and Georgia work together, then we can get Louisiana up and running and very successful, because then we're adding on a new strong state. If Wisconsin is working with another state in the Midwest who's still trying to, figure out their vibe as they go into 2024, then we're going to benefit this organization and this country as a whole. Because I think that if we have these regional directors in these states who understand the geographical terrain, who understand the layout of how these things work, then we can create a really successful partnership that benefits our organization as a whole.
Thank you so much for that question, Yana. Does anyone else have any other questions for Luke?
There's no time left.
Well, that settles it. Well, thank you so much for the responses, Luke. We're glad that you're able to make it this time. And the last chair candidate and our last candidate of the night is Maya. So Maya, your question is, much of your platform emphasizes engaging with state and local chapters or gaining input from them on national actions. So how would you balance national leadership priorities with the many interests of state and local levels?
That's a great question. Thank you. I think that really a lot of state interests and national interests, they go together a lot of the times because we're all a part of the Democratic Party. So at the end of the day, I think we all have the same baseline interest, and that's to carry out democratic values. Now, I think as we head into an election year, it's really important that as chair and just the e-board in general works to prioritize a lot of stuff on the national level, but this is not a way to excuse neglecting what our states need and what our local chapters need. They're the backbone of HSDA, and we really need to start paying more attention to them, start helping them. So while I think we should be focusing a lot of our efforts onto national goals as we head into the election year, we also have to make sure that our state chapters have this same interest at mind, and we need to do our best to help them, especially in our red and purple states. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Maya. I see Mizuki and Vincent and Bobby all have questions. So we'll start with Mizuki.
Hi, Maya. I just have one question. So do you have like a specific idea or maybe like an example of one goal that could be translated between both national and a state level?
That's a great question. I think like a good way to do that is with the election. I think that's just like a big thing that's coming up. All Democratic states basically have the same goal, and that's to elect a Democratic leader. And so I think that's one shared goal we could have. Additionally, both of them want membership increases. We want to see more engagement, more membership in our state chapters and on the national level. So I think implementing both of those and trying to work on both of those together would work really well.
All righty. Vincent, you had your hand up next.
All right. That was a great response, Maya, when it comes down to, both state and national having the same, how do you plan to pay attention to state goals? Because earlier you stated that, you want that we should focus more on the state goals, but how do you plan to, pay attention to each and every state goal or just state goals as a whole?
Right. So I think that's another great question. As chair, I want to meet with as many state leaders as possible. I really want to work closely with state leaders to understand their specific needs and specific topic initiatives. So I think just ways that I can do this is, as chair, going out to meet these different state leaders, focusing on different initiatives like advocacy support. That's a big thing. Again, playing off of the election. A lot of red states often face unique challenges when it comes to advancing certain topics or causes. And as chair, I want to advocate for the concerns and priorities of chapters in red states at the national level by amplifying their voices. I also just want to provide comprehensive guidance and training to our state leaders, just to help them develop and execute topic-specific initiatives in challenging environments or just in their regular day-to-day environments.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much for the question, Vincent. I know Bobby has a question, but just keep in mind you probably don't have a lot of time left.
You have
Bobby?
11 seconds.
Oh, actually, never mind.
Alrighty then. Well, thank you guys so much. That I believe that concludes tonight's town hall. So I just want to remind everyone at home that voting is from the 12th to the 24th. I believe, right? Maddie, correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, 12th to the 24th. Feel free to reach out to all of the candidates if you have any questions about positions or anything like that. eBoard is always accessible to you guys. So just thank you all so much for coming tonight, and thank you all to the candidates again for being so amazing. And I'm wishing the best for each and every one of you guys.